Amidst the faint mist of dawn on the Korean Peninsula, on an unsettled day at the dawn of the 20th century, a boy named Kim Il-sung cried out for the first time in a modest wooden house. No one then could have imagined that this frail child, with bright black eyes and a resolute gaze, would later become a political and military symbol, inseparably linked to the life and death struggle of the Korean people during the turbulent years of the century.
The article below has been compiled from many sources. If there are any mistakes, or if you know any interesting information, feel free to leave a comment so I can learn as well. Now, let's begin the article.
Childhood and early years. Kim Il-sung was born in 1912 into a poor farming family in the village of Manggyeongdae, near Pyongyang on the Korean Peninsula, at a time when the country was under the harsh colonial rule of Imperial Japan. From a young age, he grew up in an oppressive atmosphere where the native people endured loss of freedom, exploitation, and profound social injustice. His parents, especially his father, a patriotic schoolteacher, instilled in him a deep pride in his roots and a resilient spirit in the face of his nation's suffering. Kim Il-sung's childhood was marked by unforgettable memories. His parents' hard work to make a living, repeated crackdowns by Japanese forces on their village, and stories of patriotic fighters who sacrificed themselves to defend their homeland. From an early age, he became aware of his country's plight and felt the heavy responsibility history had placed upon him. Evenings spent by the fireside listening to his father recount uprisings and the sacrifices of ancestors planted in him a passionate desire to contribute to the cause of national liberation. In 1919, when Kim Il-sung was just 7 years old, a wave of popular uprisings swept Korea in the March 1st movement, an extensive independence movement against Japanese colonial rule. Although still a child, he deeply felt the fierce fighting spirit of his people and the brutal repression by the Japanese. This event marked a turning point in his will, fueling his growing determination to rise against oppression. The 1920s were years of great turmoil. Kim Il-sung's family, along with many other Koreans, was forced to flee to Manchuria, northeastern China, to escape intensifying Japanese repression. Life in exile was extremely harsh, but also exposed him to new ideas, patriotic comrades, and revolutionary movements against Japanese imperialism. There, Kim Il-sung continued his education and gradually joined secret activities, from youth patriotic groups to early communist organizations. In 1926, at the age of 14, Kim Il-sung joined a communist youth organization in Manchuria, beginning his revolutionary career. He actively studied Marxism-Leninism, spread ideas of national liberation, and organized propaganda and mass mobilization activities. These formative years laid the crucial foundation for his revolutionary ideals and helped him build a wide network among the Korean exile community. By the late 1920s, Kim Il-sung had emerged as one of the promising young leaders in the Northeast Asian revolutionary movement. The combination of personal hardship from his childhood and relentless learning established the groundwork for his future role as a powerful revolutionary leader. It was during this period that Kim Il-sung prepared to take the initial steps toward forming an armed force and developing a tenacious anti-Japanese resistance movement. Kim Il-sung's revolutionary journey. Entering the 1930s, Northeast Asia plunged into a turbulent era marked by the aggressive expansion of the Japanese Empire. Korea and Manchuria became primary targets in Japan's invasion strategy, subjecting the local population to extreme oppression and suffocating hardship. In this context, Kim Il-sung, a young man full of ambition, began his revolutionary path, from founding a small armed force to becoming a prominent leader of the anti-Japanese resistance movement in Northeast Asia. After years of exile in Manchuria, Kim Il-sung understood clearly that the struggle for independence could not rely solely on protests or mere propaganda activities. It required a genuine revolutionary army capable of resisting the brutal suppression of the Japanese military. In 1932, he led the establishment of the first armed groups in the forests and mountains of Manchuria, gathering young fighters mostly composed of peasants, miners, and exiled students. Although modestly equipped, this force burned with a fierce fighting spirit, ready to ambush and sabotage Japanese outposts while building trust among the local population. Soon after, under Kim Il-sung's leadership, this small guerrilla force gradually developed into a disciplined, organized army with high morale. He emphasized the principle of a people's army, valuing deep connections with the populace and relying on them as the core strength. Ambushes, supply depot destructions, and political prisoner rescues became iconic acts of unyielding resistance. Through these actions, Kim Il-sung emerged as a capable commander and inspiring leader, playing a crucial role in uniting anti-Japanese guerrilla forces throughout northeast China. However, the revolutionary movement faced brutal hardships. The Japanese Empire employed every ruthless method, from bloody crackdowns to attempts at sowing internal divisions among revolutionary groups. Kim Il-sung and his comrades faced numerous fierce battles, dangerous ambushes, and strategic retreats to preserve their forces. During this period, he was not only a military leader, but also a resilient fighter, willing to personally participate in operations while nurturing faith among soldiers and civilians alike. By the late 1930s and early 1940s, as Japanese military pressure increased, Kim Il-sung was forced to withdraw his forces to the Soviet Union for reorganization and reinforcement. There, he and his comrades rebuilt the revolutionary forces, underwent formal military training, and expanded international relations. This time in the Soviet Union provided him with valuable experience in guerrilla warfare and political organization, essential preparation for the intense struggles ahead. At the end of World War II in 1945, when Japan surrendered to the Allies, Kim Il-sung returned to the Korean Peninsula with a well-trained revolutionary force and an unyielding spirit. He became the central figure in establishing a new government in the North, opening a new chapter in the nation's history. His journey, from exile and building a small army in the remote forests to becoming a determined revolutionary leader, stands as a testament to Kim Il-sung's indomitable will and unwavering faith in the fight for independence and freedom for the Korean people. Return to the Homeland, the glory of the Liberator. In August 1945, as the guns of World War II fell silent and the victory flags of the Allies flew across Asia, Kim Il-sung, accompanied by a segment of anti-Japanese resistance forces secretly supported by the Soviet Union, crossed the Yalu River border to return to his homeland. After more than 15 years living and fighting in foreign lands, from the wandering days in Manchuria, through fierce battles in snowy forests, to months of training and reorganization in the Soviet Far East, he now stepped onto Korean soil with the stature of one who had endured it all. Warrior, commander, and symbol. In the eyes of the people in the northern villages, Kim Il-sung embodied a long-held promise: A son of Korea had returned to sweep away the invading forces. He brought not only weapons and ranks of fighters, but also a military political organizational model forged in the fires of struggle, ready to lay the foundation for a new government. In the early days after his return, Kim Il-sung quickly coordinated with Soviet officers and former resistance forces to disarm the remaining Japanese troops while organizing people's governments in local areas. Guerrilla units were merged and reorganized into regular armed forces, preparing for a new era in which Korea would no longer be a colony, but a nation ruled by Koreans themselves. From that point on, the name Kim Il-sung became associated not only with guerrilla campaigns in the Manchurian mountains, but also began to resonate as the leader of a new Korea, a post-war Korea, against the backdrop of an international landscape entering a new era of tension between the Eastern and Western blocs. Building the North Korean government, the early days of a nation. The sparse Siberian forests gradually gave way, and before Kim Il-sung unfolded a familiar land that had changed after years of bombs and battles. His homeland, Korea. In the autumn of 1945, World War II ended with Japan's defeat. Soviet forces poured into the peninsula from the north, while American troops landed from the south. The temporary military boundary at the 38th parallel became a dividing line splitting the nation in two. In this context, Kim Il-sung and his comrades returning from the Soviet Union brought with them memories of struggle and a burning desire to build a new country. On October 14, 1945, a massive rally took place in the main square of Pyongyang. Tens of thousands of people crowded in. Flags and flowers filled the sky, cheering the anti-Japanese hero as he returned. Kim Il-sung, then just over 30, stepped onto the wooden platform. His face still bore the marks of wartime hardships, but his eyes shone with faith. In his first speech on native soil, he spoke little of his military achievements, but emphasized the urgent tasks ahead: uniting the people, restoring the economy, and building a strong government from the ashes of war. With Soviet backing, a new political apparatus was quickly established. In February 1946, the Provisional People's Committee of North Korea was formed, with Kim Il-sung as its chairman. Land reforms were rapidly implemented. Lands owned by landlords and the Japanese were confiscated and redistributed to poor farmers. At the same time, destroyed industries were restored at a rapid pace, relying on technical and material support from the Soviet side. But rebuilding the country after war was not only about physical restoration. Kim Il-sung understood that a new government needed a strong military force to protect its achievements. He began organizing armed units from former guerrilla fighters and Korean soldiers who had served in the Red Army. In 1946, the Central Officers School was established to train the first generation of officers for the Korean People's Army. Meanwhile, the situation on the peninsula grew increasingly tense. The 38th parallel was no longer just a temporary boundary, but had become an ideological dividing line. In the south, a US-backed government was formed. In the north, Kim Il-sung and his comrades rushed to complete a state apparatus modeled on socialism. On September 9, 1948, amidst the roar of celebratory gunfire, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea was officially proclaimed, with Kim Il-sung becoming the first premier. From a 15-year-old wandering guerrilla in the Manchurian mountains, he was now the leader of a nation. Yet in his eyes that day, the joy of victory was mingled with concern. The country was not truly united, and the path ahead would be full of challenges. Storm on the Peninsula, the opening day of the Korean War. After firmly securing power in the north, Kim Il-sung did not hide his greatest ambition: to unify Korea under his flag. On maps hung in the meeting rooms of Pyongyang, the 38th parallel appeared as a faint line, one he believed could be erased through the force of a swift military campaign. Between 1949 and 1950, Kim tirelessly prepared. In secret meetings, his firm voice and bright eyes outlined the plan. Strike fast, annihilate the enemy, and march straight to Seoul within days before the opposition could react. Initially cautious, Soviet and Chinese advisors were gradually won over by his fiery confidence and determination. The northern forces were equipped with new rifles, heavy artillery, T-34 tanks, and fighter planes, weapons that just a few years prior had seemed unattainable. In Pyongyang, unofficial yet solemn military parades took place under the dim yellow light of dusk. Infantry, armored, and artillery units trained relentlessly. The roar of T-34 engines echoed through the valleys, heralding the storm that was coming. At dawn on June 25, 1950, the order to mobilize was given. Columns of tanks, artillery, and infantry simultaneously crossed the 38th parallel. The opening salvo shook the earth and sky, and waves of assault poured southward like a flood. Within days, Seoul fell. Kim Il-sung believed victory was only a matter of weeks. But the war quickly exceeded his expectations. The United Nations forces, led by the United States, launched massive amphibious landings on the peninsula, pushing the northern troops out of the south and advancing northward. From temporary mountain bases, Kim Il-sung resolutely commanded, issuing relentless counterattack orders. In October 1950, when the situation grew desperate, Chinese volunteer forces crossed the Yalu River, opening a new chapter in the conflict. The front lines shifted violently, every inch of land soaked with blood. For 3 years, the peninsula was engulfed in smoke and fire, with neither side willing to yield. On July 27, 1953, the armistice agreement was signed at Panmunjom. The new military boundary closely mirrored the original 38th parallel, yet the Korean peninsula had been irrevocably changed. Though Kim Il-sung did not achieve the unification he desired, he retained firm control over the north and emerged from the war as a symbol of resilience to his supporters and an implacable adversary to his opponents. Iron Fist in the shadows. Kim Il-sung after the war. When the smoke of the Korean War finally cleared in the summer of 1953, a divided, devastated, and impoverished land lay before Kim Il-sung. Yet instead of recoiling from the ruins, he saw an opportunity to transform North Korea into a fortress, not only against the South, but also to cement his absolute power into every corner of society. Factories shattered by bombs were rebuilt at a staggering pace, powered not only by the labor of the people, but also by massive aid flows from the Soviet Union and China. Standing on high platforms, Kim Il-sung painted a vision of a socialist paradise where people lived prosperously, independently, and self-sufficiently. Yet behind these promises, a tightening machinery of control began to clamp down. The press was subjected to absolute censorship, and any dissenting voices were ruthlessly eliminated. He launched purges within the Workers' Party of Korea, targeting those perceived as overly loyal to the Soviets or the Chinese. Comrades who had once stood shoulder to shoulder in the forests of Manchuria or on the war front, if found lacking in absolute loyalty, quickly disappeared from politics. or from existence altogether. Loyalty to Comrade Kim became the sole criterion for survival within the power structure. Kim Il-sung's image was meticulously crafted, from anti-Japanese hero, wartime leader, to the eternal father of the nation. Schools taught of his harsh childhood and glorious military achievements. Youth were educated to believe that the country's fate was inseparable from their leader's guidance. His portraits hung everywhere, in homes, streets, and government offices, serving not just as political symbols, but as tests of loyalty. From 1953 onward, North Korea gradually became a society where every thread of power, economy, and military was concentrated in one man. Kim Il-sung was not only the head of state, but the heartbeat of the entire system, a shadow that stretched across every path the country took. The banner of self-reliance, Kim Il-sung and the birth of Juche ideology. By the late 1950s, with the scars of war still raw across the country, Kim Il-sung came to a clear realization. Korea could no longer depend on anyone else, neither the Soviet Union nor China. In the years immediately following the war, Pyongyang had received massive aid from both communist brothers, but Kim saw the looming dangers of being caught in the strategic rivalries and divisions between Moscow and Beijing. He envisioned Korea standing firmly on its own 2 feet, like a lone warrior braving the storm. From speeches in Pyongyang's vast squares to closed-door meetings heavy with tobacco smoke, Kim began emphasizing the word Juche, meaning self-reliance and self-sufficiency. This was more than a political slogan. It became the foundational doctrine shaping the country's entire development strategy. In Kim's vision, Juche meant that the Korean people must decide their own fate, produce their own weapons, build their own industry, secure their own food supplies, and above all, defend their regime from all foreign influences. But turning Juche into reality required more than mere rhetoric. Kim launched sweeping political purges, targeting cadres deemed too sympathetic to the Soviets or under Chinese influence. Many who had fought alongside him in the Manchurian forests were now demoted, exiled, or mysteriously disappeared. The government evolved into a machine absolutely loyal to the supreme leader, where every policy and decision originated from the will of Kim Il-sung. Across the country, from snow-capped mountains to the fields along the Yalu River, new construction projects sprang up as proof of the Juche spirit. Steel mills, mechanical factories, agricultural cooperatives, all heralded as the fruits of self-reliance. Schools taught Juche ideology from the earliest grades, while newspapers praised it as the guiding light for the entire nation. Kim Il-sung transformed Juche into the very soul of North Korea, a doctrine that was both a political ideal and a tool for consolidating personal power. With Juche, he not only built a self-reliant economy on paper, but also erected an ideological wall separating Korea from the rest of the world. From that moment, Pyongyang's path had no turning back. The final journey of Kim Il-sung. From the early 1960s, Kim Il-sung had become the supreme leader of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, steadfastly committed to building a socialist regime and consolidating the absolute power of the Workers' Party of Korea. Under his leadership, the country entered a phase of centralized economic development, with programs focusing on industrialization and infrastructure construction, while simultaneously intensifying policies of isolation and strict social control to maintain domestic stability. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, Kim Il-sung focused on laying the foundation for the succession of power, while strengthening a political system characterized by family rule. He crafted the image of the dear leader, who was both a great leader and the father of the entire Korean nation. The diplomatic policies during this period were highly confrontational toward South Korea and Western powers, while reinforcing close ties with the Soviet Union and China, although tensions occasionally arose in these relationships. By the late 1970s and throughout the 1980s, against the backdrop of the Cold War entering a new phase of heightened tension, Kim Il-sung maintained his powerful position, steering the country through economic crises and hardships caused by increasing international isolation. He continued to push forward the militarization policy and developed a secret nuclear program aimed at strengthening North Korea's strategic standing on the international stage. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Kim Il-sung's health began to decline. Nevertheless, he made great efforts to maintain his power and transfer leadership to his eldest son, Kim Jong-il, who had been thoroughly trained and prepared to succeed him. This succession marked a critical transition in North Korea's history, as Kim Il-sung sought to preserve political stability in a rapidly changing world. Kim Il-sung passed away on July 8, 1994, ending a journey of more than 80 years of relentless struggle for the goals of independence, unification, and the construction of socialism in Korea. Although there remain many controversies regarding his legacy and historical role, it is undeniable that Kim Il-sung was a central figure who shaped the destiny of the Korean Peninsula in the 20th century, leaving a profound mark on the political history of Northeast Asia and the world.
Thank you all for following and listening. If you enjoyed and found it interesting, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay tuned for our upcoming videos.